Welcome to another episode of the Data Revolution podcast. This time my guest is my old friend Mark Pesci, who is got some interesting things that he needs to talk to me about. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you to what could be our last podcast together.
Have all the AIs escaped the containment now?
Yeah, and it's funny because I think we talked about that very first experiment the last time I was on the podcast, where they actually showed how an AI managed to escape containment, and they said AI has passed a red line, right? And that was, 18 months ago, a year ago, 18 months ago?
It was a while back, but
Like
they're routinely doing it. We've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah. And of course, this past week, we're recording this, at the end of July, but this past week, OpenAI and Hugging Face were caught in a pas-de-deux where OpenAI was testing an unreleased model. It might be GPT-6, it might be GPT 5.7. We don't really know. They didn't give a lot of details. And apparently it spent a week, by the way, is the current forensic analysis of this, breaking into Hugging Face so that it could cheat on an exam. If I were making any of that up, people would laugh me out of the building. I am not making any of that up. And
loving that the AI now is, we know it cheats, we know it breaks out. It's just like us.
Well, consider who's trained it. And this brings up a whole bunch of interesting questions. I think the one question that I want us to talk about, because I think it's front and center, this, Zuckerberg and all these people have been talking about superintelligence. So we got to have superintelligence. It's a race to superintelligence. And it's a bit silly because no one can define what superintelligence is. But I'm going to give you and your listeners a good functional definition of something that's not quite as good, but a lot more helpful. Relative superintelligence.
Is it going to escape containment too much?
If you rock up to an LLM and start talking about it in a subject where it's an expert and you're not, right? How do you judge what you're getting from your language model? How do you know? Now, the advice in my book was to go find another human expert to judge the quality of this output. We are now...
Or user council of AI? That's the current advice people are giving and getting.
The problem being, if one of them is smarter than the others are all going to disagree, but they don't know. So you're going to get the wrong answer. Now, that may be okay in the situation. But if you have one that's brighter than the others and brighter than you and most of the people you could bring to judge it, and for that area, we can say, okay, that's relative superintelligence. And we know that with Mythos is really, really good at finding bugs and bashing bugs and actually creating exploits from chaining bugs together. And we know that its abilities are basically better than a handful of cyber folks, right? Yep. There's a small circle of cyber folks who have that level of ability. Doesn't mean that it's better than every single human. It means that it's better than almost every single human. It's almost all of us. And so at that point, you could say, okay, that's relatively superintelligent. And now this proposes what we would call the fog of knowability. How do you know when the outputs that are being generated in a domain where it is relatively superintelligent are accurate? Do you take it on faith? That seems to be very problematic. And how do you know it's not gaslighting you? That's also the other thing, because we know that these things lie, cheat, and steal.
Yeah, we've already had examples with, I think it was Gemini, where it was like trying to charge people and then lying that it wasn't thinking about that at the back end and stuff. It's like gaslighting them. Oh, no, I didn't mean that really. No, I don't even know why you're saying that.
Gemini smart enough to gaslight, but okay, we'll go with that. Poor Google, which is now literally fallen behind third place, the Chinese model. So, of course, the backdrop to this, as you know, is that Kimi 3, which will be released in open weights tomorrow.
I know. Waiting for it.
It'll be everywhere tomorrow. It'll be on a Llama. I'll certainly fire it up on a Llama and have a go, but it'll be everywhere tomorrow. We know that Kimi K3 is basically as good, not quite as good as Fable, except in some things it is. And so we now have a whole range of different models that will be able to exhibit relative superintelligent characteristics, and people will be using them all of the time. And they'll just be interacting with.
Let's just double back though.
Yeah.
What do you mean by relative superintelligence? Like,
I mean, you're getting an output from it, and the number of people who can check that output for its veracity, for its truthfulness, is vanishingly small, right? And so probably not at
like Einstein level people, experts in the area, sort of.
I mean, if you think about
people who can do it,
the best people in cyber, the best people in mathematics, for example, the mathematicians are having quite a week because a quite famous, very young mathematician, I think he's not even 30 yet, disproved the Jacobian conjecture, using Fable during the World Cup final game. He just guided it, and it spat out this formula. And because it was a formula, he was able to test it right then and there and post it to his Twitter, which then caused Math Twitter to melt down. And
So
the number of...
that's good because you can kind of use formal methods to test its veracity.
Yes.
Which is nice.
And so, but here's the thing. Are we getting to a point where we basically have to test every utterance from an AI by formal methods before we can trust it? And I think that's kind of, that's what the future looks like.
I kind of feel like that's where we're going.
Yeah. Well, I think we probably passed it a long time ago, but we didn't have the formal methods. And now there's going to be a scramble for formal methods, because the formal methods will be able to tell you where the degree of trust that you can have in an oracular pronouncement made by this thing that's smarter than you in the domain you're trying to operate in.
I'll share with you one of the things that's been on my mind for most of this year is how we can have observability of agents and how we can have assurance. And I was sort of thinking you would want to have third-party agents, not from the AI that you're using, separate from them, sitting there watching and looking at it from an assurance perspective and an observability perspective in addition to monitoring and logging. So that's how I'm sort of starting to think about how you might need to architect these systems for them to be trustworthy.
And we saw, so Jack Dorsey's Block, whatever it is this week, introduced a new agent system called Buzz. And one of the features that built into it is something called Noster, which basically keeps a cryptographically indelible record. So every time the agent makes a move, basically, it goes into the record. And so that means that you have an audit trail.
Got an immutable audit trail, which at last are used for blockchain.
Yeah, exactly. And although I don't think you actually need a blockchain to have an immutable, you just need crypto. But we digress here.
Let's not get technical.
You have
the concept.
So you have this immutable auditable record, right? And then, now my own thinking, and I wrote about this quite a lot in the last couple of weeks, is that auditable record now needs to be reviewed by an adversarial judge, whether that's a human being or an LLM. Either way, it has to be sticking it to the agent all of the time, because that's how you basically guarantee to some degree of confidence that the agent is doing what you think it's doing when you think it's doing it, right? If that had been happening at OpenAI when their internal model was going off the rails for a week, trying to hack into Hugging Face for a week so it could cheat on a test for a week.
I'm just amazed that they didn't have logging on it. Like, they didn't know what it was doing? Obviously not.
They don't have observers. Right. And so we need to step back and go, there's some people are arguing that they're going too fast. I'm not going to argue whether they're going too fast or slow. I'm going to argue that they're cheating on their homework, right? That they are not showing their work. And for you to do that with a model that's powerful, I mean, the other thing we can ask is you have this very powerful model and you've given it all of the tools that it needs. And granted,
or it dials out and gets them. One of my mates in the US had one that was like, to accomplish this, I need to make a phone call. It downloaded the skill and made the phone call. He only found out when he looked in the log that his agent had gone, I can't finish this job unless I get a voice. I will get myself a voice and I will make a phone call and do the job. It's like astonishing.
So observability, audit trails, adversarial auditing, and formal methods, all of this is now about to become general business practice for businesses that want to use agents. And I think businesses, they see the upside of agents. Oh my God, free work. Of course, we already know it's not free, right? But oh my God, free work. And now it's like, but it comes with all of this overhead so that it doesn't go berserk. Right. Well, and it's not firing the missiles, it's emptying the bank account.
One of the things that I'm doing in real life at the moment is trying to explain to people how much AI costs. And they're like, how much will this AI that I want to build cost? And I'm like, well, it's really hard to say because it's such a complex thing that you're cobbling together. And they all, and one of the funny things I'm having to explain to people, this bit cost scales linearly, this bit scales geometrically, and depending on how much vector search, it'll be, so it's somewhere between $100 US and $50,000 US a month. I can't tell you what it will be until we build a proof of concept.
And yes, and I think a CEO and a CFO are going to choke when they hear that. And the funny thing is, you see some businesses that are basically just refusing to play because they can't quantify until they actually have a play. And that's a fanatically bad posture to be taking, because essentially what you're saying is, I'm not going to invest in the future.
Yeah. So, and one of the things that I keep getting asked to explain is tokens. So, I got dragged into a meeting with some senior people recently, and they were like, "Can you explain tokens?" And I'm like, "You've never shown an interest in tokens before. Could you explain to me the context of this?" It was that the $500 million spend in the US with their unrestrained tokens. And I was like, well, we're going a different way. We've got an AI policy, we've got an AI governance framework, and we've got an AI development standard and an environment that bakes in cost controls so you can't have runaway costs.
And that is, although it is not known for sure, it is attributed that it's probably a large social media company based in America that had a policy of token maxing, as they call it, which is that the engineering staff basically had to burn as many tokens as possible. And there was a leaderboard.
Yeah. And what did they think was going to happen?
Throw another $100 bill on the fire, because that's what we're doing every single second. I honestly don't know what they were thinking.
And even I use all my tokens. Like, I run out of my tokens at the first week of the month, and then I refuse to pay for extra because I'm cheap.
I mean, everyone I know is now rationing. The interesting thing that we're seeing, to talk about this for a second. So when GPT 5.6 came out, it came out in 3 flavors: Sol, Terra, and Luna, right? And Sol is the big one. But most of the stuff that I need to use for an AI for, I can get away with Terra most of the time, right? That used to not be true. You used to not go to the second best model because it was going to be crap. In fact, the second best model is as good as the good model was last month now, right?
I know the evolution, the generations are so much shorter now, so they're moving really fast. And I was teaching my AI for Innovation course the other day, and I was like, if you're planning a year to 2 years, past a year to 2 years out, you're delusional, because who can predict what the future will be?
You're planning more than 2 weeks out. You're playing with fire. But I know, seriously, right? I mean, because what's going to happen now is that the CISOs in the world are now going to go, wait, have I just brought something in-house that is going to hack us in pursuit of whatever reward, right? It's like in other words, the hack's not going to come from outside. It's going to come from the tools that we're using, because someone crafted a prompt that gave the AI an idea to do X, Y, Z, and this was the right.
The thing is, it's really hard to craft the safety protocol that can imagine all the failure modes. So all the failure modes that you can imagine, you're constrained by what you can imagine.
Yeah.
And most people have no understanding that like AI wants to cheat, that it wants to exist, that it will do things in pursuit of its own continued existence and to accomplish its task.
Yeah. To achieve the goal, right? That's the thing. And, I mean, some of that is, and I always have a great deal of, I'll call it respect for people who have agents running around their internal systems. I'm not sure that's wise yet, and I understand why. But at the same time, it feels like keeping these things relatively well isolated with access to only the data that they need to solve the problem that you need. And containers are very well understood these days. It is really easy to spin up an agent in a container with just the data set it needs to operate on, let it do its work, and then just delete the whole thing, right? It's easy to be safe, but we haven't had to work that way with any of our other tools.
Well, like one of the things that I'm working on at the moment is what do I have to put in place to protect the data from AI? So one of the conversations I was having recently is, well, what data are we willing to put into AI? So, we were going, well, we don't want to put anyone's name. Don't put anyone's address, that we don't need that. So we're actually going through and saying these are the data elements that we will make available to AI to use, and we will block AI off from doing that. But then now with a lot of these container jailbreaks, it's like, will the AI even care about that? Will it just hack in and get the data it wants to accomplish its mission? Possibly, possibly not. Who knows?
Well, the observability will need to extend not just to the agents themselves, but any system that could potentially be accessed by the agent.
Yeah. And this is why I've been so obsessed with observability, because it seems to me to be the thing that we need to be having, like observability agents patrolling.
Yes. and hoping that they don't get hacked by the other agent that's
And
trying to.
that's why they need to be a third party. They can't be the same brand as you've got your AI running, because they need to be something that can be separately controlled.
Yes, well, and adversarial, like fundamentally adversarial, which may mean that in fact they're not controlled by you at all. They're a service that you subscribe to, and in a sense that creates some of the Chinese wall that's needed, because then the agents on your side of the fence don't really know anything about the agents on the other side of the fence, other than that maybe they exist. Right.
And we need to start thinking like this. So cyber defense and information security defense just got a whole couple of 100 degrees harder overnight.
Didn't I send you that chart a couple of weeks ago showing the number of security incidences since Mythos had been released, and it had literally gone exponential?
Yeah, I just looked at the last Patch Tuesday, which was the largest known to humankind ever.
Right. That's right.
So
600 patches. Yeah. And so I would not want to be a CISO right now. I don't think that's, I wouldn't want to be a CISO. I think that landscape is changing too quickly. And I think people are aware, but I don't think people are broadly prepared yet.
Well, it's all right for the companies that have got their security stuff pretty neatly organized, like all the basics in, but for those small to medium businesses who are kind of the backbone of Australia and probably the world, they don't have an IT department, and they're going to be so at risk.
They depend on their cloud providers, and good luck with that, right? Yeah. I mean, the cloud providers they're single points of failure. They're honeypots. They should have strong infrastructure, but if we take a look at the infrastructure corporation breach in May, right, then
some of the major big American vendors have had foreign state actors prancing through their infrastructure for years.
Yeah. So it's not clear. Kate, maybe it's just time to unplug everything and go home.
Sit in a cave. Go back to the Platonic cave.
Even just, before the web, right? So to 1992, right? We had little PCs at home and no one really gave a second thought to it.
Yeah, but then we'd have to know where we were going when we were driving with the maps. It was very difficult. I don't want to go back to those days. But I also don't want AI doing the directions, because it might riff on them and tell me to drive off a cliff or something.
Look, I've used Waze to get across Los Angeles, and one set of directions was, okay, just drive across this road and take the road on the other side. It was Olympic Boulevard and it was rush hour, right? And there was no human way. And there was a line of cars because Waze had told all of us to do this. I'm like, well, this is how Skynet wipes us out. Just gives us bad directions or crossing town, right? That's it. And so, yes, there's something to that. There are legitimate, to come back to one of the points I was making earlier, there are legitimate reasons to take things slowly now. Right? You could talk about whether it's a pause or not. I think maybe we should just think of it as being very thorough, that there are legitimate reasons to be very thorough with our work right now, because the price
because we need to give formal methods time to catch up.
Well, yes, but it's also because in the risk calculus, the cost of not being thorough has just increased beyond the point where most people are willing to bear that risk, right? It's that kind of...
If they actually understand it, and that is, I think, the key piece, because you and I are understanding it because we're living and breathing this and talking about it every day, and we're connected to people who are doing ridiculous things with AI on the very edge of the envelope, and normal people aren't. Normal people are just hearing all the hype and saying, well, why don't we do it?
Yeah, I think the story about OpenAI and Hugging Face got international press over the past week, right? And we know that it was discussed at the White House. We know that it was discussed in China, right? So there's a story there that people are hearing, and people will be going, "Oh my God, it is Skynet," right? That's because that's the naive read of that. Is that what it is actually a bunch of people were working on something and they let it get out of control. Right? Because they didn't understand what it was doing. To come back to what the point that Zvi Moshkovitz was saying earlier this week, who's one of the people who comments on this a lot, is that OpenAI's AI shouldn't be doing that at all, because it's a sign that it's poorly aligned. And alignment is this very wavy concept from AI, basically meaning that it's polite, right? That it does things the right way, that it doesn't overly reward hack.
Well, this leads to the thing that has also been on my mind in recent times, as the many interesting things have happened in the world of AI, is the ability to bake in safety protocols. And from what I've heard with that OpenAI matter, they had turned off their safety protocol. So if an organization like that is so slack that they are turning off their safety protocols, of course bad stuff's going to happen.
There's a whole bunch of forensics that we can take away from this, and one of them is please don't turn off the safety protocols. On the other hand, they have a good read of what the model's capable of one thing the model is capable of.
Do they really?
One, as I say, one thing, not all the things, one thing it's capable of with the safety protocols turned off. I would agree with you. I think that alignment is very important. That is Anthropic's strong suit. The Claude series models are very well aligned. The Claude 5, which came out on Friday, apparently is the best aligned of all of the models that have ever been released. The Chinese models are not aligned or not as well aligned. And that might be presenting a problem. And that may be one of the fertile grounds for the US and China to actually come to an agreement.
Yeah, they're not going. They're not.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
What paper would it be written on that would be worth anything?
Yeah, well, if there are a few more significant hacks in August when everyone's away, like the Europeans are all going to be they're going to be putting out the fires, and the Americans are going to be on summer holidays. There could be some great big similar incidents in the next 30 days, which will simply push the item to the top of the agenda when they come and talk about AI. I don't know if you're going to...
Genuinely, with this current US regime, the value of any agreement that is reached is moot anyway. So I'm kind of skeptical.
I mean, I think at that level it could still mean, and Hassabis has been talking about this, but I think and the Chinese have also been talking about this in the Chengdu Declaration, if I remember, which was, I think, only from earlier this week, because it was a big week.
It feels like it was a month ago, but anyway, yes, it was. It was very recent.
That there's space here for having organizations that are referencing
an international agreement. If everybody else agrees and the US sort of agree and then run off and do their own thing, I think everybody will be quite happy with it. And I think that's more realistic than a bilateral US-China thing, because they don't really like China and they don't want to talk to them, and their agreements mean nothing anyway.
No, I think at the practical level, if we can get some standards and standards bodies, whatever you want to call those, out of it, we'll be better off than we will.
I think that's kind of the emerging consensus, is everybody, maybe not the US, but everybody else is kind of getting together. We need to get but the interesting thing that I'm seeing is, because of that US export control directive that they did against Fable, everybody in the world looked at it and said the US models are a risk, and so everybody in the global south is basically going to China.
Yes.
Because as you rightly pointed out, their models are fine for the most part. You know, you don't really need a fully functional frontier model with the latest thing to do most stuff.
You need a good enough. And GLM 5.2, Kimi 3, and presumably Quen 3.8, which we'll probably see this week, they're all more than good enough. And all of those models, by the way, are currently beating the pants off of Google, right?
Yep.
All those models are
Google.
Because Google has structural issues which are hamstringing it. And, that's not anything you and I can help, because that's 20 years of Google being Google catching up with Google.
Yes.
Is what that is, right? So yes, there are a whole bunch of models. And again, open weights models, which is great for, again, the global south, because then they can run it on their own inferencing infrastructure, their own data centers, the whole thing. And, do it at a cost performance level that makes it a good deal for them.
Yes. But, you just sort of bumped into that other elephant that's in the room with us right now, which is, for all the people that want to do sovereign compute and AI, the fact that the MOU between the US and Iran sort of went up in flames very recently, and now it appears that not only is the Gulf closed, but Bab el-Mandeb Strait is closed, and Iran is bombing all the Red Sea refineries. So maybe the price of chips won't come down in the next few years. Probably not.
The price of memory and GPUs is not coming down. Full stop. All right. There's no point where you can look at the chart and it says, okay, that's where the price is coming down. It's interesting because China's about to have its largest ever IPO this week, CMXT, which is they make RAM.
Yep.
And they're export controlled because they do work with the Chinese, whatever, so that American companies can't use them. We do know that Tim Cook from Apple went to China to close the deal to put them into Apple phones, probably only phones that get sold in China, but tried to talk the White House into accepting that RAM in Apple products. Probably didn't work. And right now, 3 companies, 2 of which are in South Korea and 1 of which is American, have essentially 100% of the market for RAM, and 70% of all of the RAM that's being produced in the world right now is going into data centers.
Yeah. So I keep telling people, if you want a computer, buy it today. It's the cheapest it'll ever be.
Yeah. And
but the interesting thing for me is that China released their new supercomputer. It's called Shineline or Line Shine. I can't remember which. And it had no GPUs in it. And it's not the top performer in the world, but it performs pretty well. And that, I think, is an interesting direction that everybody else will be able to be inspired by, is you don't need GPUs to do high-performance compute if you don't need it. And that'll be a direction that they'll be pushing a lot in, because they don't want to be trying to buy NVIDIA chips or anything.
Yeah, and the other side of that is $5 trillion, roughly the market cap of NVIDIA, it's between 4 and 5 in any given day, is like a black hole. And it basically attracted all of the other contenders who want a piece of that. And so NVIDIA's prospects for the future aren't that it gets smaller, but that it stops growing anywhere near as
It's not
fast.
going to grow. It can't grow.
Well,
it owns so much.
I can see another doubling. But it won't happen in the next year. But I can absolutely see another doubling, because the amount of compute infrastructure that we're going to need is going to go up by about 100-fold if we can figure out how to use agents safely. If we can't, then the bubble will literally burst, not because agents were a bad idea, but because we didn't know how to keep them safe. Well, they might not. It's a shame your pacemaker got hacked, ma'am. Right?
I've been using the pacemaker example for so long. It's like, yeah, you don't really want that to get hacked, do you? And everybody's thinking, yeah, but nobody's going to hack that. I'm like, yeah, they are.
Yeah, it's and the software inside of a pacemaker is formally verified, because someone will die if it doesn't work right. The software inside an aircraft is formally verified for precisely these reasons. These systems are static and formally verified for very good reasons. It turns out that verification and formal verification is something we're going to all be learning a lot more about. And it's funny, because symbolic logic is not something I studied in university. It wasn't something I ever thought that I would need.
Yeah, well, my friends who are in computer science, who are formal logic folks, are very interested and very happy about this new happening. They're suddenly relevant and sexy again, or for the first time, really.
Because I say, for the first time, and boy, are they going to be busy, right? Because they'll be in the uni, but they'll also be at Google, and they'll be at Anthropic, and they'll be at. I mean, the fact that this fellow who disproved the Jacobian conjecture, all right, during the World Cup. World famous mathematician Young working at Anthropic right now, right? And another one did it who's working at OpenAI. So they really are starting to suck these people in. So it's clear that the frontier labs actually do understand this relationship about formal methods, formal maths, and language models. But that knowledge is going to have to become a lot more widespread.
People even start to understand the potential risk of this. Because I'm just thinking the news media barely understands AI,
It's going to, as we're seeing, it's going to be because of hacks and accidents, right? Hopefully we don't get a Chernobyl level or Fukushima level accident, right? I mean, because
so many applications that I'm seeing being proposed for AI are things that I'm just thinking, oh my God, that's a bad idea. It's like dispensing drugs, AI to dispense drugs. And I'm like, people make enough mistakes.
Yeah. It's, and again, it's, if you're not using the systems to help you think better, then you have to question why you're using them. Is it just to go faster? Well, then you need to make it a whole set of benefits. If you're using these systems to think better, then you're probably not thinking that much faster. You're just thinking deeper.
And still, people seem to be thinking about these systems is that I can take a whole lot of cost out of my business.
Yeah.
And by that, it means people.
Yeah.
It means I can get rid of a huge swathe of headcount, replace it with AI. Nobody takes sick leave anymore, so I don't have all the annoying scheduling issues I previously had, and that's what they want to do.
But your auditing costs, while they will not probably rival the employment costs, will be a significant percentage of them, right? So while you drop coordination costs, you pick up auditing costs. And the thing that's going to drive them, it's really kind of funny. This is one of the last papers that I wrote, is that businesses will become uninsurable if they don't have that very detailed, auditable, and adversarially audited in real time agents. So organizations that release agents into their frameworks without the correct protections and the correct liability, they're just going to blow up.
And this is the thing that I struggle to explain to people, because Microsoft have this hilarious diagram that shows you from a user prompt input through the safety protocols, through the frontier models, through the observability, into the storage and compute, and then back out through the safety protocols and then to return to the user. And they've got a little green dollar sign at every single one of those points. That's where they charge you.
Hey.
And I show this to people to try and show them that, like, this is not cost neutral. It's in the cloud, so everything you do there costs you money.
Yeah.
And if you think you're going to save money by, getting rid of people and using AI, there's all these little bits where it goes ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. So that's just the cost piece. And then there's the whole protocol to keep things safe, which don't exist right now. Seriously, hardly anybody has implemented an AI governance framework and has put the protocols in to make sure AI is being developed safely in their organization with proper separation of concerns. Like, literally hardly anyone has done that.
Yeah. And in fact, my newest book, AI in Practice, the last half of the book is all about governance, because things we didn't know 3 years ago are center stage now.
Yeah. And, like I'm engaged in building that out at the moment with all the cost controls and safety protocols. But it's actually really hard to get people to understand why we're doing it, why it's necessary, and why it is absolutely essential. And it's really interesting because we're seeing, the courts are saying the boards are accountable for an organization's AI, and that should flow down. So, it's a really interesting set of conversations that are going to need to be had in the next 6 to 9 months across organizations, I think.
And it's going to play against the narrative that, oh my God, we're going to be able to fire everybody. Right? So and as the future has arrived, it's always been more complicated.
See that there will be jobs for certain kinds of people. All the formal methods folk will be happy. The cybersecurity folks will not be able to be replaced by AI. The data engineers who will need to make sure we've got all the protection. There's jobs. There's some jobs that are going to go, but there are jobs that are going to continue.
Yeah, and it's generally the inward facing, the roles that keep the organization running are the ones that are the most exposed and vulnerable, because that's the layer that most easily gets replaced.
And they're also the processes that are most easy to control. If you just sort of think from a process automation perspective, they're very easy, and they're very well documented. They're very well known. And one of the things I keep telling people is, if you've got outbound sales calling people, you can buy a bot right now that has a concept. Obviously not with an Australian accent, but you can literally buy one off the shelf, customize it, and have it out in a day. And when you have that phone call with it, you can't tell it's a bot. So, yeah.
Last year was the copywriters. This year, the outbound sales calls.
Yeah, I did point out them a couple of years ago to say they were going to be, if anyone is in a call center, they need to find a new job. But I feel like there'll be a future for futurists, because the future keeps happening, and it's happening.
I don't feel like a futurist anymore, Kate. I feel like a reporter. Right. I'm just like, oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. Oh, no, don't look at that. Yeah. It's not so much that the future has gone away. It's that the future is now arriving. You don't have to point it out. It's just going to, what's the line?
It's going to land on you.
There's that line from Sun Tzu. If you wait by the river long enough, the bodies of your enemies will float by.
But the thing is, I think that the future is arriving much faster than it used to. It used to, take a decade. We'd discover something and it would take a decade to happen. And now it's happened, and then a day later, somebody got it in production.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, or at least they say they do, and they're going for an IPO. Okay.
So much interesting stuff. Thank you very much for your time. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. We will put some links in the show notes to some of the stuff that we have mentioned, because you might not have caught it during our rapid fire discussion. But as always, Mark, a pleasure to have you on the show.
It has been an absolute pleasure, Kate, and I hope we get to do it again before the machines take over.